everyone, and welcome to week 3 of our Policy 101 series presented by ILMEA. And we hope that in the first 2 installments, you all have learned as much as I have about how a bill becomes a law here in Illinois, kind of what we need to know and laying the groundwork for really getting into the nuts and bolts of some of the legislative action, which we're going to talk about this week. We are getting into some details, like I mentioned, about current education laws that are starting to take effect, as well as some legislation that is in process. Rather than put that all on these slides and make it a little tricky to read as we're talking, Lauren, our policy and advocacy intern, has created a companion document to go with this, which we'll link in the video notes. So don't feel like you have to, I mean, if you are like taking notes, that's awesome. Don't feel like you have to get into all of that. We have it all laid out for you really clearly in terms of the details of the laws, sponsors. So anyway, that companion document is there to help you. And we hope that the information that we're talking about today will be helpful as well. So we are going to be talking about, like I said, laws that are currently starting to take effect. They've already been passed. They went through the process that we talked about last week. And we're also going to touch on some laws that are in the middle of that process of the committees and the readings and the passage between the House and Senate in the Illinois General Assembly. So Lauren has been doing so much digging on this and working on bringing all of this information together. So Lauren, thank you so much for all of that work that you've done to kind of help us understand where we're at with education legislation today.
Yeah, of course. It's been a lot of fun.
Nerdy fun, right?
Yeah, very much so. All right. So we'll start off today with all of the new education laws that have been signed into law by Governor Pritzker. So these are laws that that were signed into law this past legislative session. So the session just ended like last month, earlier this month, something like that, recently ended. So as you can see here, there is just kind of an overview of all of the laws. So a good chunk of these are already in effect, although we do have 2 that go into effect January 1st of next year. So as Lori said, we do have a companion document that outlines for you the details of these, but I'll go over them quickly. So this lapsed educator license law, previously, if you had let your license lapse, it would be a $500 fee to reinstate your license. And to help with the teacher shortage, getting people back into education, that fee is now $50. So much, much more manageable if you're looking to get back into teaching. And also I should add, if you are a retired teacher, there's no fees to come back to work. Educator evaluations. This is great news, I hope, for most of you. It allows a school district to waive. So they have the option for the upcoming 2022 to 2023 school year. Your evaluation can be waived if you received an excellent or a proficient rating in your last evaluation cycle. So hopefully your district chooses to take you up on that. Teacher professional development hours.
That with the educator evaluations, so that's something like starting at the beginning of this coming school year, educators, if they receive that, can go to their evaluator, go to their administrator and say, hey, because of this law that's in effect for the school year, this is an option on the table. What do you think?
Yeah, so hopefully they are aware of it, but you can definitely bring that up just to make sure, and even because if they are choosing to do it, you can get an idea of, well, why are you deciding to evaluate us this year? All of those things.
Great.
The teacher professional development hours. So for any licensure cycle that includes the previous school year, so our 2021 to 2022 school year, your professional development hours required for renewal are lessened by 20%. So I actually went, you can look in Ellis, that should already be credited into your account. So you need 20% less professional development hours than we otherwise would.
Yeah, that definitely has an impact on, we hear about that all the time in the ILMEA state office about people looking for content specific professional development, so we can still focus on that content specific part of it, but maybe taking the burden off of making sure they're meeting that hourly requirement.
Yes, absolutely. Because especially as music teachers, we just tend to have less time available for all of this. High school prerequisites for a diploma. So in the elective option of our school code, previously it said you needed 1 unit of music, art, foreign language, or vocational education. They're now adding into that list forensic speech, which is essentially speech and debate. So that's another elective option for students to take in high school. This mental health day, you may have heard this year that students were allowed to take mental health days as part of their sick days. And this now allows educators to do the same thing. So there are some stipulations around that. So for example, just like how if you're out for physical health for a certain number of days, you might need a doctor's note. Same thing, if you need to be out for multiple days due to mental health, your school district could still require a doctor's note, but we can now take those mental health days. Nice. Interpreters provided in meetings basically solidifies that we would hope that there would be an interpreter for parents in any IEP 504 planning meetings, but this solidifies it. So not just IEP and 504 planning meetings, these could also be multidisciplinary conferences, mediations, or due process hearings. So there should now legally be anytime a student's future is being discussed with their parents, interpreter there if needed. And then we have the 2 laws that go into effect January 1st, 2023. The first, there's an addition to the Gender Equity Advisory Committee. So by the end of 2023, specifically December 15th, the committee is going to submit recommendations on how school districts can better support historically disadvantaged males, including African-American students and other students of color, to ensure educational equity. So basically, they'll be taking the entire year to do research into this and then provide their recommendations by December. And then lastly, students can now take an excused absence, 1 absence per year to participate in a civic event. So we love that, obviously, as policy people, getting students out and engaged. So these are all of our most recent education laws.
And so the next thing we're going to talk about then is a list or an overview of the laws that are currently in process. And right before we started recording, Lauren and I were talking about the General Assembly legislative calendar. We're recording this in June of 2022 right now, and they are on their summer break. So they're home, they're in their districts. The representatives and senators from Illinois in the Illinois General Assembly are home and in their home districts. So they're not, working in Springfield. They're not voting on anything right now, unless there's an emergency thing that comes up where the governor calls them into session. But so you're going to look for that to start up again in the fall, like probably late September, early October is what we're seeing on the calendar. So while it's a good time to connect with your representatives and senators, at events, 4th of July festivities that they might be present at, you can go to meet and greet type of events in your home district, so that when the fall comes up and these bills are taken up again, you may have already met them, or you can say, I saw you speak at such and such event. I'd like to talk to you more about this particular bill. So just for a timing consideration, these bills are in process, but they're kind of, is it accurate to say, Lauren, they're kind of like hit the pause button on these for at least right now?
Yeah, that's definitely accurate.
All right, well, why don't you tell us then what we can expect to maybe hear or see more about in the fall when they take them back up again?
Sure. So if you remember from last week, this was kind of our visual for when bills are going through the House and the Senate. So I use this to try and give you a visual for where are all of these bills and resolutions in the process. So we have 2 resolutions that are currently in committee. So remember, committee is the first step after the initial readings. This is where they're really trying to hammer out all of the details of the bill, or in this case, the resolution. So as a reminder, a resolution does not become law. It's more of a formal statement or opinion by the legislature. So the first one we have is a House joint resolution. That means both, it's starting in the House, but both the House and the Senate are agreeing. They're both putting this forth. A teacher shortage task force. So they are working to create a task force to address the Illinois teacher shortage. Things that they're looking to do: obtain and analyze data, audit teacher licensure laws, review student teacher examinations, existing teacher professional development requirements. And then once they look at all of that, they're going to provide recommendations to address teacher shortage. You can see here the committee it's currently in is the Elementary and Secondary Education Administration Licensing and Charter Schools. So it is a mouthful, but that's the committee that one is in. And then we also have a House resolution for an education and sharing day. Now I will say, I don't quite know with this one how much it would probably be changed or moving forward, because as the language currently states, it declares April 12th, 2022 as Education and Sharing Day, which has already passed. So if this bill or if this resolution is moving forward, it'll probably take some changes. But the description of it, it says it further calls upon government officials, educators, volunteers, and citizens to reach out to those within their communities and work to create a better, brighter, and more hopeful future for all. So it would probably just be, like a nice celebratory day in schools. And that is in the School Curriculum and Policies Committee.
And what we can do too is also in the video notes, we'll link to the pages on the Illinois General Assembly where it lists who's on these committees, so that if it is someone from a viewer's or an ILMEA member's home district, then they know exactly who they reach out to as a constituent.
Yes, that's a great idea. And I should also add, in our document, we did list who is sponsoring and co-sponsoring currently all of these bills. So if your representative is sponsoring them, you can reach out to give encouragement. If you want your representative to sign on as a sponsor, you can reach out for that as well.
Great.
And then we have two House bills. So the bills, these are in process of becoming an actual law as opposed to the resolutions, that are actually really, really close to being sent to the governor. So you can see here, they've gone through their third readings, but in both of these cases, the House approved the bill, and then the Senate approved the bill with amendments. So if you remember, when the Senate approves with amendments, now it has to go back to the House again because they had approved a different version. So both of these are pending what's called concurrence in the House of Representatives. So this first one, House Bill 3573, is about remote learning days. Similar to what we've experienced kind of through emergency the past few years, this would allow a school year to utilize a remote learning day in lieu of an emergency day, or if your school building is being used as a polling place. Okay. So it would cement some of those remote learning days we've gotten used to. And then House Bill 3173 is about introducing gun safety courses. So this is not a requirement, but it would allow school districts an option to provide a course on gun safety, either as part of the school day or as an after-school program. This one is interesting because this did get a lot of amendments through it to kind of add on things not related to the gun safety course. Oh, and so this bill also adds basically some mitigating factors that students are allowed to disclose during review for suspension. So not really related, but that language is also in there.
Okay. So one of the bills that and correct me if I'm wrong, a bill that has already gone into or will be taking effect in a couple of years, which we'll touch on in a second, is the foreign language graduation requirement. I know this is at the forefront of a lot of minds of music educators. So we wanted to set aside some time just to talk about that because it could potentially have an impact on student participation in music programs in high schools across the state. So let's talk a little bit about what that foreign language graduation requirement is and kind of what we need to know about it in the next couple of years moving forward.
Absolutely. So for those of you who may not have heard about this, this bill was introduced in February of 2019, and it passed last year in March of 2021. So a good 2 years, it took this bill to become into law.
A few things happened in between there.
Yes, just a few. And essentially, this added on to high school graduation requirements and increased the course load for students. These courses included a computer science class, laboratory science classes, and foreign language. So previously, foreign language has not been a requirement to graduate high school. With this new law, 2 years of a foreign language is now required. And it actually stipulates in the law that a 3rd year of foreign language can still serve as a student's elective requirement. So this is at the bottom of the slide here. And if you recall from earlier, we have one elective option for high school graduation requirements. So students can take a year of music, art, foreign language, vocational tech, or that new forensic speech. So there are lots of very valid concerns. If the students are already taking 2 years of a foreign language, it's going to be real easy to just take that 3rd language, and then they don't necessarily need to take that fine arts requirement.
And also the scheduling considerations. If someone does want to be a music ensemble class and has to accommodate this 2-year foreign language requirement as well, that could be really difficult.
Yes. So the good news is that currently this is not effective until students who enter the 9th grade in 2028. Okay. So there is a few years out, which means that there is plenty of time to get a bill introduced, to change something, and to make a difference. And as we've seen, they've already done that, right? So this forensic speech was just added in. There is an opportunity to get in and to change this before it takes effect. Okay. But we have obviously some concerns about pulling away from music programs. So right now, our biggest suggestion on a local level, continue to build those relationships with your students, families, administrators. We know that one of the biggest reasons that students are in music programs is for that community. So keep building up your communities so that they want to fight to stay in the programs. And then we'll be looking at some policy pushes. The preferred one being to separate a fine arts graduation requirement out from foreign language. So there's a lot of precedents for this already. 19 states plus Washington, D.C. have 2 separate graduation requirements. So they have a fine arts graduation requirement, they have a foreign language requirement. In the Midwest, those states specifically, we've got Michigan, Ohio, Kansas, and South Dakota are all models for us that we can look to right here in the Midwest.
Where they have the separation of the 2 different graduation requirements between language and fine arts. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Another potential option, Michigan allows a foreign language requirement to be substituted for a fine arts course. So that could be a potential policy push, but I will say that the reason the foreign language requirement was added in was to better align with U of I's admission standards. So just kind of broadly looking at the picture of Illinois, it might be easier for us to just get a separate requirement versus, and also foreign language is important to be learning and studying.
And it is worth mentioning too, ISB has said, or in a couple different ways, they are concerned with the burden that having this 2-year foreign language requirement among so many others could be on schools for student schedule, for the teacher shortage. That ISB is not taking this lightly in terms of, let's just keep adding more to the student program. They know that this is something that has to be addressed. So maybe looking at how to be flexible with those graduation requirements, like you mentioned, having them separate would be the ideal. having them substitute for each other might be another good way to take the burden off and still allow student scheduling into our program so that they can take the classes they'd like to for their graduation. So.
Yeah, it's definitely not as easy as it seems to just add in a graduation requirement. Right. There's a lot of moving pieces.
So any last thoughts kind of as we look at where we are and where we're going in terms of legislation of just kind of things that people should keep in mind over the summer about what they should know, why they should care, what they should be doing, kind of in summary as we wrap it up for this week?
Yeah, so over the summer, I would definitely, as you said, I believe at the beginning, this is a great time to get engaged. Just figure out even something as simple as figuring out who are your representatives, following them on social media so that if something comes up during the school year, you already know that information. It's a little bit easier to reach out. Most of your representatives' websites are going to have like kind of right there information for how to contact your representative. And definitely, I would say keep an eye on the foreign language requirement. There is, I'm sure, going to be much talk about this in the coming years.
Absolutely. So we'll link so many resources in the notes of this video. We'll share them out on social media too, so that, like you said, over the summer, people can really lay the groundwork for equipping themselves and empowering themselves to be involved in the process moving forward. Right?
Absolutely.
All right, so next week and the next episode of our series here, we are going to be talking with a policy and legislative professional with the Illinois Principals Association. We're very excited to talk about how they've gotten involved, what some of their success stories are from kind of a related association here in the state. So make sure to come back next week, Thursday, and we'll keep the conversation going. Until then, have a great week.